knowledge. And if he understands everything that I've said up to this point about logic and knowledge and so on, then he must break down where's the logical contradiction in this type of view. What my line of reasoning, what my line of questioning is looking to show is that Sapphire and I are saying, or we actually believe in the same thing.
Do you see how
just by
underhanded this
different
is?
means.
The framing
which I promise to make very clear when it comes to my line of questioning.
Right? And he's trying to reframe it as is it necessary for God to be deistic?
Cool.
You get what I mean? So he says he's going like, in order for Scribe to affirm the position that God is necessarily relational, he has to knock down Bubba's argument first for deism.
And then do your best to answer.
Am I making any sense?
Directly and concisely. And we'll do the same thing
That's not an argument.
Sapphire,
so Bubba's not here to argue against the affirmative.
Yeah, I'm ready.
He's just taking a shit on the floor.
Your mic broke up there for a second, but you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Cool. All right, I'm starting your timer right now. You have 30 minutes.
Alrighty. So Bubba, first and foremost, just as a quick statement to outline it, my argument is positively against the deistic worldview, and in terms of how God is relational. It's not about divine revelation, and I'm not going into tag. It's about the sustaining of the universe. So my first question to you would be: do you actually believe in a God that sustains the universe? How would that work, given that your God is impersonal?
I believe that the creator of the universe is what we would define as a deity, which deity, of course, means God. So, yes, I do believe in a God, and I believe that he's impersonal. And are you asking why I believe that?
The follow-up question would: how would that God sustain the universe, and how would that be possible if your God is impersonal?
I believe that the universe is self-sustaining. Like, I believe that the way that the scientists describe the Big Bang and the way that rapid outward expansion, just through when the universe had a point in which it all began, both physically and in time, is accurate. You know, I appeal to the consensus of the scientists, which know this stuff.
So your argument is that when God created the universe, he instituted some sort of sustaining principle with the creation.
I'd say so. If it's possible, so it's possible that the universe one day is going to break apart into a million pieces because gravity wasn't finely tuned the correct way. But so far, over the course of billions of years, that hasn't happened yet.
So how does that not just kick the can down the road? Because
very good.
If God created the universe with sustaining principle, then wouldn't that mean God is sustaining the sustaining principle, thus interacting with the creation?
The reason why it could be classified as kicking the can down the road is because it's not necessary, and when we're defining a creator God, to say that it's self-sustaining, that the universe must be self-sustaining. It's just that it is necessary for the creation of the universe that God had the ability to create it.
But that was your response to the whether or not how God creates the universe. You said he created it with a self-sustaining principle.
I said it's possible. It's possible that the universe actually isn't self-sustaining, and in 10 billion years from now, gravity is going to fly all out of proportion, and we're all going to break apart into a million pieces. It's possible, but so far we're fine. So far that hasn't happened.
But remember, like I said in my opening statement, a thing can only sustain itself in its becoming, but not in its being, right? Because the being of a thing deals with its form or with its essence. So the issue that we're having here is that you can describe via science or whatever mechanism you'd like to how and a sort of physical creation, like I said, builder building the house. But the fact of the matter is that the being of the thing is not sustained by the builder itself.
Right. So, and the example that you used of the builder building the house, take the universe to be like the house. The house will stand on its own for hundreds of years, even if we were to never touch it. the builder doesn't have to interact with the house in order for it to stay in its structure. It could, like, don't get me wrong, it could, and this works in my paradigm because the house eventually, the bricks and the steel and the wood will eventually decay over hundreds, maybe thousands of years. But the fact is, the house can self-sustain itself for a long period of time.
What?
No, again,
no.
The builder
is
only the cause of the becoming, unlike God, who directly causes.
He's just kicking the can down the road.
So not specifically the house, but God, being the creator, directly causes the being of the creation.
I don't think Bubba has
builder,
I don't think he thinks through the implications of his reasoning.
But he is not the sustainer of the essence of the building.
And then that's it.
Yeah, I'd say
he's like a half-assed
right. The structure of the building philosopher. Is made by the nature of the building itself.
Because remember that I outlined 2 modes of preservation: accidental and indirect, and direct, essential preservation.
And yeah, what about it? It's like, I'm not sure how, and I'm not sure how it relates though. Like, sure, in the case of the house and the builder building the house, which of those are, what's being used there? Is it indirect or is it accidental, as you're trying to say?
Indirect or accidental? That's basically the
directly.
Same thing. He's looking for
this applies when something
depends
entirely on another thing for its very existence.
Bubba just doesn't care.
Sure.
If the cause stopped acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. All created things fall into this category. They only exist because God actively maintains them. Without God's continual action, the things would vanish instantly. That's my definition there for direct.
I just don't see that it's necessary that God needs to sustain his own creation in order for his creation to be sustained. I think that the universe can sustain itself, even if it's for a finite amount of time. It still sustains itself nonetheless.
Nothing can sustain its own being. It can sustain the becoming of the being.
The building of the example that we use. I don't want to ask you questions in your time, but so I'll just assert that the building. So when the builder builds a building, that's a tongue twister, will sustain itself until it eventually decays and falls apart, unless it's maintained.
So again, God cannot grant to a creature to be preserved in
so then it doesn't sustain
after
itself.
The cessation of
what is
the divine
going
influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself. Right? That would violate the law of non-contradiction, which you do subscribe. Well, you do subscribe that because it's a contradiction. You do subscribe to objective logic, right?
Well, I think that
logic is objective.
I think that logic is what you would call transcendental, but it's a descriptive idea which we use to describe the universe. So we could.
But it's objective. It's discoverable. Because I also believe that's transcendental. So
yes.
If logic being objective is incontrovertible, if it's objective, then that would necessitate that the laws of logic, as we know them, as we've discovered them, would be incontrovertible. So you would have to adhere to the law of non-contradiction. You can't have God create a thing that is not sustained by him, because he can't create a thing to not have been created by him.
Right, but I don't see where the contradiction is in Deism under that principle.
Because God is the source of all being, even in Deism.
Yeah, God is the source, kind of like the watchmaker or the prime mover. And I don't, however, means that I think that logic, for example, is self-sustaining. Like, logic is an objective truth, which can't really be broken in that way. And it doesn't need God to sustain it for it to be true.
But if he's the source of all being, then he has to continually act to maintain the being. Even if it's just a sustaining principle, like I said earlier, we've kicked the can down the road. What sustains the sustaining principle?
Are you asking what sustains God?
No, you said in my previous question, your response was that when God created the world, that He created it with a
Bubba's just
sustaining
dumb.
principle.
He can't even follow a
But I
line of
mentioned that
reasoning.
just kicks the can down the road. So the question is, what would be sustaining the sustaining principle?
I think that it is possible for either the universe to be sustaining itself for eternity, or for one day the universe
I
to
don't
fall
think we
apart
should
and
have
it's not be
any
able to sustain
sympathy for
itself
people
anymore,
like
much like the
Bubba.
building.
That's my
The
point.
building will either exist eternally, which unlikely, of course, or it will fall apart at one point. And I believe that the universe will fall apart. I personally believe that the universe will
This is
fall apart at one
insane.
point, but it's unknown as to when.
And now, is that because the sustainer ceases to act? Because remember, the sustaining principle falling apart would imply that.
It could, but the important part is that it's not necessary as to whether or not God is relational.
No, it is, because that is a God that is contrary to the claim of deism as a whole, being impersonal and not interacting with the creation. If he does in fact sustain the creation, then that would violate this sort of deistic foundation. But on top of that, back to my question about sustaining, because that's really the crux of my entire argument here. It seems to me that it's necessarily the case that if the thing that is sustaining, whether it is God or this sustaining principle, ceases to sustain the thing, then the thing itself ceases. It's incoherent to assert that a thing can exist apart. The thing being sustained can exist apart from the thing sustaining it.
And that's where I just reject that premise, just because under the necessary qualities which I gave to God in my opening statement, it's necessary for God to have the power of creation. It's necessary for God to have a mind, and it's necessary for God to exist outside of time and space.
No, in his opening, he said
the creation doesn't
when
need
it
to be
comes
sustained.
to divine
And in order for
attributes,
God
it doesn't matter.
God doesn't need to have a
the
relationship
attributes
with
themselves
its
and
creation in
properties
order
don't
for the creation to
matter.
be sustained.
This is
And
crazy.
I just reject that premise on the basis that
Taco's fighting a
that's
strong
not
man.
the necessary preconditions for any creator
It's really
who creates a
distracting. He
being,
needs to
which
stop doing this
at
AI
worst is a
bullshit.
black swan fallacy, but still which still is logical nonetheless.
Everything that has being simultaneously demands on God for their existence, or depends on God for their existence. So the problem that I'm having here is I don't think you're seeing how the incoherence of your worldview here with this. The problem is not about whether or not God created the world with a sustaining principle or God directly sustains it. Under your worldview, it is necessary. It is necessary that the God created the world, wound it up like a watch, and then set it off onto its own course. The problem with that is that God is the being that is necessary. It is the necessary cause for the effect of creation. Every effect depends upon its cause. Without the cause being maintained, what happens to the effect?
Can you kind of rephrase that question?
What? How is that hard?
That wasn't me rephrasing it, because it goes back to the thing
good job, Sapphire.
that is
Don't
sustained
let him fucking have...
is dependent upon the
Dude,
sustainer.
Bubba's just stupid.
And under your worldview, if the sustainer is a sustaining principle that God, this watchmaker God, built into the fabric of the universe when he created it.
So, when I was in high school, I used to tutor people who had trouble doing math.
Because
when I was,
it is necessary that the sustaining principle itself would be sustained by something.
You keep telling them,
every cause has its effect. You would agree with that, right? Every cause has its effect.
I have 2 fingers, and I put it next to 2 fingers.
Yeah.
How many fingers total?
And every effect would be dependent on its cause, right?
Every effect would be dependent on its cause. Yes, but I think what the misunderstanding here is that you're trying to assert to me that God sustaining his creation is necessary, and I'm saying it's not necessary. which is why I don't believe, and that's the whole idea. You're trying to say that because God needs to be relational to his creation, and when he's relational, he's sustaining his creation. I'm saying that it's not necessary. It's totally possible that the creation will fall apart into a billion million pieces, but what that entails is that it's still not necessary, which is the title of the debate.
Unfortunately, that's a straw man, and like I said in my opening, like I said, I gave the reasoning for why God needs to sustain. I didn't just say that it's necessary. I appealed to a shared belief in objective logic. I appealed to a shared belief that every cause has its effect and that every effect is dependent on its cause. And now I'm demonstrating the incoherence of stating that just because you don't know that the universe could fall apart, that what I'm saying is the reason why the universe would fall apart is as if the necessary sustaining component, the God, ceases to act on the creation. And the reason why that's a problem for your deistic worldview is because you claim that God does not interact with the creation.
And yeah, I don't see as to why God must interact with his creation in order for it to sustain itself, if that's what you're saying. And the same way that most creations that beings make are self-sustaining. The watchmaker, the builder building the building. Like I'm saying, I've been very consistent with the point that the universe could eventually fall apart and not be able to sustain itself at some point. All that proves is that God made a creation which wasn't sustainable, which wasn't self-sustainable.
Remember, I outlined two different modes of preservation, though. The
indirect and direct.
Indirect accidental, or the essential and direct, right?
Yeah. And you would be saying that God is essential. God is not essential under Deism, but he is essential under Theism and a relational God. And what you're providing to me right now is an external critique, which isn't going to really find any contradictions in my belief. It's just more or less going to be asserting yours onto mine.
What?
Well, again, what I'm critiquing here, what I'm critiquing here.
He agreed that logic is transcendental, and then he's just trying to say he's trying to hand wave it away as an external critique.
That, like I said in my opening statement, that God is the sustainer of the universe, unlike in the deistic worldview, where God does not sustain the universe. Rather, the deistic worldview leads to God being the cause of the becoming, rather than being the creator or the cause of the being itself. So, again, it's not about just interaction. It's about sustaining. But the sustaining is in and of itself an interaction. And again, you're still not contending with the issue here as far as the fact of the matter of something like a house falling apart 100 years, 200 years, whatever, after the builder builds it. That's because the cause of the becoming of the building has ceased. It's because the cause of the being itself is not being sustained. That's because the thing that is sustained is dependent upon the thing sustaining it. Every cause has its effect. Every effect is dependent upon its cause.
I don't believe that this argument works, because that would be implying that several builders could be the thing that are sustaining sustaining the building, right?
But remember, some causes only bring things into existence.
Dude,
but do not need to sustain them.
He's just throwing non sequiturs. Whether or not multiple builders are
not
buildings?
Because the builders
here's the thing. You could probably strap Bubba down and just say, hey,
food,
like in the example,
but the food
right,
stays warm
which is an analogy
for a while
for
after
like
it's removed
creation
from the fire.
in the Deist
That would
model.
be the indirect.
You could have a builder continue to sustain the building by like repairing its parts.
However, other causes must continuously act to keep something in existence. Remember the sun and the air analogy, or even we can use a light bulb in a room, right? The room does not stay lit after you turn the light switch off, because the air in the room does not retain, it does not sustain the light.
The idea that the universe is a self-sustaining principle,
the air
when he's also at the same time trying to say that it's gonna.
So it is necessary for the light in the room to be sustained by the external source.
Yeah, the heaviness of your argument is following on the necessity of being able to be sustained, like how the light is the light bulb is the thing that is sustaining the light. I don't believe that the universe is like this. It's not analogous, because I say that the universe is more like the watchmaker or the builder, where they caused it, they're not sustaining it, but they caused it, and it's able to sustain itself for a fixed amount of time or for a finite amount of time, and then it's eventually going to decay into nothingness, and it's no longer going to exist. And I just feel the need to restate my premise again. Like I don't see the universe as like the light in the light bulb. It's not essential. It's not essential. It is non-essential, and therefore not a necessity.
This is exactly the issue, because the builder analogy only works if God doesn't create ex nihilo. Did God in your system create from pre-existing matter, or did he create from nothing?
I don't know. I'm agnostic on that. I don't know how God created the universe. It's just whatever he did, he did.
So ultimately,
just under 10 minutes left.
All right, thank you, Taco. In previous conversations, you've alluded to the idea that God has created ex nihilo.
Yeah, God would be the uncaused cause, because an uncaused cause is necessary for the universe to exist.
Okay, so if God creates ex nihilo, then that means the things that he has created are necessary for him to have created them. He is the necessary sustainer of the things created.
Again, you keep on trying to push the word sustain. Sustain isn't the topic of conversation. It's whether it's necessary for him to be relational.
It is
trying to assert that
topic of sustain.
being able to sustain means that it must be relational.
Dude,
again,
he's trying to sidestep the question, because Bubba's saying that.
I see the universe, I don't know
if you were able to track. Basically, he's saying that he's agnostic about creation ex nihilo, but then he affirms that God is the uncaused cause. So he doesn't see how those two concepts relate, or one implies the other.
The course of the debate that I was going
He's not
to
a deist.
Taking us down, and there weren't any objections.
He's just a cosmic skeptic.
Up until this point.
Yeah, and because I've been willing to hear you out to this point as to why sustaining would be necessary.
I've been willing to hear you out.
It's well, we are debating deism. We are debating your deistic worldview. Like I said, I'm taking the affirmative stance against your deistic worldview. And like I said on the face of the debate, at the very front, in my opening, that I wasn't debating divine revelation. I wasn't debating tag. And the problem that I'm debating here is that in a deistic worldview, God creates it and then leaves it. He does not sustain it.
Right. It's not necessary for him to sustain it. And that's really where the brick wall is here, where the misunderstanding is here. It's God sustaining his creation is not necessary because the universe could fall apart, as I've said a few times. And that's totally possible. All that means is that like the universe that he created was not sustainable.
Again, it is necessary, because remember, you've already conceded every effect has its cause. Every effect is dependent upon its cause. And God is sustaining existence itself.
Yeah, every effect is dependent on its cause in order for that effect to exist, not to be sustained. It's the universe was caused by God, but it's not necessary for that cause to be sustained in order for the fact that it was still created. And
You just said it's necessary for it to exist. That's sustaining.
To exist, not to continue existing.
To exist at all. Because remember, the only reason it ceases to exist is because the sustaining ceases. Not because there was a built-in predetermined point at which it would not exist. A cause does not cause a non-effect.
Okay. It's the build, and this is why, like, I'll say maybe a fourth or a fifth time, and it's that the universe is not like the universe is the builder and the building. The builder does not need to sustain the building. The building can just exist and sustain itself on its own. And that's where there's still a disconnect here somehow. And I think that you just don't agree, and that's why you keep pressing me on this issue.
Well, that's exactly the issue, because remember, the builder analogy only works if God doesn't create ex nihilo.
Sure. Well, in the case, that's where the God creating the universe is different than the builder creating the building. Because, yeah, right. I don't. And it's also not at the same time, because I don't know what the method of creation was for God. If he really did create ex nihilo, maybe he did. I don't know. But
when I pressed you on it, you did concede to that. You said he's the uncaused cause.
Yeah, the uncaused necessary. Yep, the uncaused necessary cause of the universe. I believe that the universe did have a starting point at some point, and there had to be something that caused it, but nothing existed at the same time. So what caused it? I believe it was God.
If God only started the becoming of the universe and not the being of the universe, it means that the form already existed before the becoming.
It's like
not exactly. All it means is
half the people left that were there at the beginning.
Existence could eventually evaporate into nothingness eventually, and it just could sustain itself for a finite period of time.
Just under 5 minutes?
It would mean that the universe is also an uncaused cause in your worldview.
I still don't see how it's necessary for God to sustain his creation. I think we're just we're at the impasse. Is you believe that universe is like the light bulb and the light. I believe that the universe is like the watch and the watchmaker.
But again, the watch and watchmaker analogy, the fire and the water, the builder and the building, all of that is only relevant if God did not create ex nihilo. So either the only options we have here, there's no third option here. The only options we have are God created from nothing, or he created with a pre-existing substance. God is the uncaused cause, uncaused himself into a pre-existing toy box full of the materials he needed to create the things. Because remember, this is not just about the becoming, and it's about the sustaining of the being as well. God is not just the source of the becoming, but the being itself. Remember, would you say that God is the source of all being? Be by virtue of being the creator. You say that?
Define being.
The form or the essence of a thing.
The cause of the being is what you're saying?
Existence.
I believe that God is the cause under that definition. God is the cause of all being, yes.
So, God, necessarily being the cause of all being, didn't come into universe, didn't come into existence. He didn't cause himself concurrently with the universe, right? The universe is the creation, correct?
Right, the universe is the creation.
Ergo, every effect has its cause. Every effect is dependent upon its cause. Even if you want to try and take an indirect route and state something to the effect of God created the universe with a sustaining principle, like I said earlier a couple times, it just kicks the can down the road, because that sustaining principle is not God itself. It doesn't self-exist. It's not the necessary uncaused cause itself. Its existence also depends on the creative action of the God. And remember, it's logically incoherent. It's a contradiction to state that God can create a thing that was not created by him. God cannot cause a thing to exist that wasn't caused by him.
This is where I think that you're really trying to do what you've accused me of in the past, and trying to pigeonhole me into this belief, into something that I don't actually believe in.
Now he's just fucking
I don't believe
making
that God is
emotional
necessary.
appeal. Oh, that's not fair. That's not fair.
God necessarily has to sustain his own creation. And I feel like I've had to say this way too many times, and you're trying to do the very thing which you've accused me of doing in the past. I don't believe this, but you're really, 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 really trying to assert it because it's what you believe.
He's just
and if I did believe it, then it would disprove Deism.
He's just
but I don't.
Well, God and the universe are in a hierarchical causal chain. That means that it simultaneously depends on him, and he is the source of the existence of the universe itself. And again, just because you don't believe that God is the sustainer, it doesn't actually resolve the logical entailments that I've outlined, such as non-contradiction, the dependency, the argument from contingency. And I've given a fully fleshed out argument, and that you aren't just stating it.
I still fail to see the logical contradiction, which requires
because you're dumb, Bubba. That's why you don't see the logical contradiction.
And I don't think it's a matter of my own misunderstanding at this point.
It is a matter of your own misunderstanding.
Well, like I've said,
you can't trust people without morals because they're just going to blame you. If you try to help Bubba out, he's going to blame you for his problems.
Go ahead and finish up your statement, and then we'll move on to the next.
These people are not your friends.
Well, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all being. You've acknowledged that he created ex nihilo. You've acknowledged that logic is objective. Well, we reiterated a couple times, but I'm just finishing my statement here. We have acknowledged that you believe that logic is objective. So things like the law of non-contradiction, the argument from contingency, all of the entailments with objective logic would be necessary in and of themselves. Ultimately, it just seems like either you don't really subscribe to deism, or you're just not familiar with the underlying logical baggage that is necessary for the arguments themselves.
Okay, and we'll be moving into the cross-exam for Bubba, the cross-exam for Bubba now. Once again, let's be polite to each other. Bubba, you're in control of your cross-exam. Sapphire, please do your best to respond directly and concisely to his questions. Bubba, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Yep, I'm ready. 3, 2, 1, go.
Starting your timer now. You have 30 minutes.
All right, Sapphire, so I define something as necessary to be something that must be the way that it is. Do you agree?
Yeah, I have no problem with necessary. Yeah, necessary is the common definition.
So I believe that a rational being is a being which you can have a relationship with. Do you agree?
Not necessarily. You can. It's possible. But in terms of, as far as your question goes, I mean, I guess I could just let you follow up, but
no, I want to use.
I'm trying to preempt it.
No, I want to use your definitions for what you define. But I only have 3 terms to define, and I
want to know. You asked if it's if it's possible to have a relationship with a rational being, which I would argue is yes. I mean, we do it all the time. There's all sorts of possible relationships that we have and don't have. You know, I could become friends with someone tomorrow that I've never met. They're a rational agent. It's possible that could happen. It's possible that couldn't happen.
And yeah, I just say, like, would you say that a being which is relational means that you have the ability to have a relationship with it?
No, not necessarily. Like, in one sense, relational would mean relationship, but relation, in terms of how I've been implying it, is it's a type of fact. It's either true or false of 2 things. The relations connect distinct entities, and they involve the 3 critical components of the subject, the term, and the foundation. So it's not necessarily about interpersonal relation in that sense. A relation is that which connects the distinct entities in the way that I'm employing it.
Yes, the relationship. I just need a definitive definition to work with for relational being.
Yeah, so when I say that God is relational, I'm saying that God is connected to as a distinct entity to us, or the creation as another distinct entity. Not necessarily that God is, I'm not employing it in the sense, for the purposes of this argument, that me and God are buds or besties and that we go get mimosas on Saturday, right? Relation is a correlative. So, for example, creator and creation is an example of a relation. It's not necessarily a relationship, but it's a relation in terms of the philosophical sense that I'm employing the term.
What would a personal being be then? What is a being which is personal?
A being that's personal would be a being that has personhood. So not necessarily personal in the sense of like, this is my personal can of Monster drink.
This is cringe.
That would denote ownership. That's a sense in which we could use the term, but the sense in which I employ
so terrible,
personal being in terms of God.
I don't know who said it was cringe.
I'm arguing that God has personhood.
Bubba's extremely cringe.
And just here, real quick, define personhood, and then I can make a point and move on to the next set of questions.
So he's conscious with a will and an intention. A being that is a person is an individual it's an individual subsistence of rational nature.
The thing is Bubba hasn't studied this topic at all.
Like I said,
right?
That has will,
if he was an
desires,
honest interlocutor, he would have studied the different definitions.
So
of
what we're saying then, your claim in this debate is going to be
classical
that
theism. He would have covered all those ways of describing
necessary.
Personal being.
It must be the case that God is a being which can connect to other distinct entities and has personhood, which means as a being which is conscious with the will and intention and rational nature.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, just reiterating what we've covered so far, yeah.
Yep. And so, you heard me say in my intro, and I iterated it in the cross-exam from your end, that I believe that what is necessary for a creator to create its creation is that it has to have a conscious mind, and it has to have the ability to create. In other words, the watchmaker and the watchmaker has to have the knowledge to create the watch, and it has to have the ability to create the watch. And so I would say, what do you consider to be necessary for a creator to create a creation?
Those same sorts of qualities would be necessary, logically. The foreknowledge, the will, the intellect, like you've said. The God would have to be rational. The God would have to have not just
and Bubba
the knowledge
said that he didn't have to have those necessary
how to produce or the thing produced, but he would also have to have the desire to produce the thing.
That he does have
okay, cool. So everything I stated then, is there anything that you would add to the ability to create and the knowledge of how to create?
Not as far as you've asked up to this point, man.
Okay, cool. Then I want to move to how you understand God to be, or into the Christian God, and I promise that this is relevant. It's like, you believe that God is all powerful.
Well, unfortunately, I don't see what this has to do
I'll get
with
to
the argument as I've laid out in my opening statement or in my cross-examination.
Yep, I'm promising you that it'll be relevant.
Trust me, bro. All of Bubba's arguments is trust me, bro.
Okay, how do you know that and why?
Well, God, in the sense that him being all-powerful, has the power to do all things which are possible. He's not lacking in the ability to do those things that are logically possible. It's not like God can create a boulder that's too big for him to lift, because that would be logically incoherent.
I know. I'm saying, how do you know these things? How do you know that and why?
Well, but I'm not doing a precept. I'm doing.
I know. Neither am I.
Against deism. I'm arguing against deism.
I know. I'm arguing against theism right now, and I'm saying, how do you know that God is all powerful, and how do you know that?
Well, again, Bubba, I'm just just trying to stay here. Like I've said at the beginning, I'm not arguing personal revelation. I mean, I preempted this entire line. It feels like when I said that I'm not arguing miracles. I'm not arguing prayer. I'm not arguing divine revelation. I said all those things in my and just like you acknowledged in your opening statement, you said that those would be the way that I would have the knowledge of the God. You've already acknowledged it, but I've already said that I'm not. I haven't proposed those sorts of arguments.
I know, and I think is everyone who's in the audience right now, including me and Taco, knows that you're an Eastern Orthodox Christian. So when I promise you that when I'm asking you what you believe about God's nature, such as his all-powerfulness, his all-knowingness, his triune nature, I'm promising you that it's going to be relevant in like 2 or 3 minutes if you're just answer directly. So how do you know that God is all-powerful?
Well, God is the source of all being. And the source of all being has to be able to do whatever is logically possible. Power is the ability to actualize potential. That is, to bring something into being or to sustain something in being. You have finite power. Limited beings can only actualize certain potentials. A builder can build a house, but he cannot create life. Right? You have infinite power. A being with infinite or unlimited power can actualize any potential that is logically possible. So if something is the source of all being, it must have the power to actualize all things that exist. If it lacked power over some aspect of reality, it could not be the cause of that aspect, which would contradict its status as the source of all being.
I just need a real quick, you say that it is logically necessary for God to be all-powerful because he has the ability to create creation.
Well, I'm trying to stick within the confines of the debate as far as what we've discussed and the arguments that I've actually made. The reason why I'm keeping it tight is that it's logically necessary for God to be all-powerful if he is the source of all being, which is the
Sapphire, I didn't question any of your questions when you were questioning me. So if you cannot do that for me. And
Daddy.
If I'm questioning, I'm only just trying to if I'm just if I'm questioning, I'm only trying to clarify. And
okay,
just let me answer.
Okay, I'm letting you answer, but you're not answering. So, and the next thing is just like I asked you about how do you know that he's all powerful? How do you know that he's all knowing?
Because
Because
it's logically necessary for God to be all powerful if he's the source of all being.
What makes it logically necessary?
Well, power is the ability to actualize potential. If to bring something into being or to sustain something in being, for example, a being of unlimited power like God being all powerful, sorry, excuse me for a second. A being with unlimited power can actualize any potential that is logically possible. So again, it's a logical necessity. That's the argument that I'm making here. And how I know is precept. How I have access to knowledge in the first place is not really the form or the function of the structure of the debate. We're debating deism and theism and whether or not God is relational.
Yep, my next 2 or 3 questions are going to really make clear to you, I hope, as to why I'm asking you these questions. How do you know that God is a Trinity?
Well, I just don't see what the point of asking about the Trinity.
Stop questioning my questions.
Stop questioning my questions. Just let me ask whatever I want.
The only reason I'd be asking
this is insane, dude. Bubba's such a moron.
Get a firmer grasp on where you're coming from.
And then Taco's gonna come in and be like, "Please don't bulldoze. Please don't bulldoze." You see, fucking Taco. He's fucking.
Why is it necessary for God to be a Trinity?
No. How do you know that God is a Trinity?
I was gonna come here and ask.
I'm on the affirmative. You're on the negative.
I know. I'm saying to you, and I may ask Taco for some time back because I'm telling you, I promise.
No, he's asking for time back, dude. Just like he fucking did in mine to me.
Just like, how do you know that God is a Trinity?
I don't believe that's necessary.
You don't believe it's necessary for God to be a Trinity? Okay. Then don't believe it's necessary in order for him to create the universe, right?
No, we've already acknowledged what my necessary beliefs are.
They're that he has to be all-powerful, he has to be all-knowing.
And because it's not because I don't believe that God is a Trinity, but the Trinity is revelational knowledge, which I stated at the beginning of my opening statement, I'm not discussing.
And if I ask you questions about if I ask you that if you're getting all this information because you rationalize it, then
no,
you kind of have to answer that question.
The Trinity is not something we rationalize to. It's revealed knowledge.
Okay, revealed knowledge from where?
Obviously from my God.
Cool. Well, we'll get into that next. And then final question: before, is God relational, and how do you know?
But I'm not arguing for revealed knowledge.
You're arguing for whether or not God is relational.
Yes, and relations are, as
he's already stated,
defined earlier, not relation as you are trying to either get me to define or trying to switch the definition to. When you asked me at the very beginning of this cross-referencing,
Sapphire, you're filibustering too much. Please.
I'm not filibustering.
Please directly answer.
Insofar as I have defined a relation as connecting
what's the
distinct
topic in here?
entities,
Can I ask?
yes, it's necessary that God, being the creator, is relational to the creation. Insofar as I have defined it for the purpose of this debate, not as however you would like me to define it.
Right. And is it necessary that God must have all these qualities, except for the Trinity, because you concede on that? So is it necessary that God must have these qualities in order to create the universe?
Yes, it's logically necessary for God to be all-powerful if he is the source of all being, yeah.
And how is that information revealed to you?
Is SapphireScribe a Catholic?
Well, in the same way that information has been revealed to you,
Eastern Orthodox.
Apart from, like I've said, the things I'm not debating. I'm not here. I'm not proposing.
Sure. If you're going to say that it's in the same way that I would have that knowledge revealed to me, I say it's through my own personal revelation. Do you say the same thing?
Again, I've already defined personal, so I don't know how you're employing the term if you're using it the same way that I've defined it.
I'm employing the term like this because what me and you both have is a theory that says that God created the universe. And in order for a theory to gain more utility is that how much information it provides about the universe and the variety of explanatory scope about reality. What it seems like to me is that you've taken deism and sort of tacked on these other qualities of God, which provide no explanatory scope, no new information about the universe, and doesn't answer any of the question that deism doesn't already answer.
No, but
let's put the term
deism is incoherent.
The only reason
it's more plausible that if there is a God and he's uncaused cause, that he would be personally sustaining the universe.
To say that God is
rather than
all-powerful,
just
all-knowingness, the Trinity, which you said that you say it's not even necessary. So I'm curious if
you're the one that proposed the Trinity, bro. I didn't say the Trinity in any of my arguments.
I asked you about the Trinity, and you said you don't believe that is necessary. So I'm curious as if you could provide any one of those things which I just said with the theory that God is relational.
The only thing that I said that would be necessary is that his personhood, being that he is a conscious mind with a will and an intellect, and that he's all-powerful, meaning that he has the ability to actualize all things that are logically possible. Those are the things that I've stated are necessary for the God.
And I want to see if you're listening. What was the question I just asked you?
I don't know.
I said, can you provide any explanatory scope or new information that's revealed about the universe because of these qualities. Because God is all powerful, it reveals this about the universe.
Actually, yeah, because like I said in my earlier argument, dude, I don't think you understand, based on from your deistic worldview, the logical entailments that are involved with the system. So what I can provide as far as like what's utility, and I don't believe utility is fully described as how you've narrowly defined it. I think utility is perfectly.
I haven't defined utility.
I think yeah, you did.
No, I didn't. I said that in order for a theory to maintain utility, it would have a couple of these things.
Okay, so again, I don't think that I don't really subscribe to your issue here. I don't understand like what your problem is as far as keeping things within the scope of the debate, arguing with the arguments that I've actually made rather than trying to.
So it sounds like he's trying to build an argument. Go ahead and respond to his questions, right?
Here. I can provide as to what I just said and why it's relevant. I said that Sapphire seems to have taken deism, the necessary qualities of God, and tacked on these new qualities unto God, such as him being relational, the point of the debate. You've tacked on this quality that is not necessary, doesn't provide any new explanatory scope about knowledge of the universe. And okay, then that's the question. And that is the question that I'm asking you. What is the explanatory scope of saying that God is relational or is necessary for him to be relational?
Because like I've said, I argued that God is the sustainer. I have argued from the entire time that it's necessary for God to be relational. I've argued in terms, again, I'll just remind you of my definition. The relation is to be understood.
I remember it. You don't need to rehash your definitions. I just need you to answer.
Okay, again, question. So what exactly hasn't been answered to your satisfaction here, bro?
So far, what you've said is that it's necessary for God to sustain the universe because you view the universe in the analogy of like the light in the light bulb, and I reject that. Because
it's
I said that
logically
the universe
necessary for him to have these qualities. You understand that? Like but no, hold on. You said logic was objective.
And we're not going back. You should have asked me that in the cross-examine, which you did actually. And I responded, and I responded, and then that means that this question has been asked and answered.
So stick to it.
And I have been very consistent. I believe that the universe is like the watch and the watchmaker, the builder and the building. You believe that the universe is like the light in the light bulb. But those things
don't hold up logically.
You believe that the universe is like the light in the light bulb,
which is logically coherent.
But it doesn't provide any new explanatory scope about the universe.
I explained why the builder and the builder is false.
That deism. You said because it's necessary for God to sustain his creation, and I reject that premise from the beginning.
No, you didn't reject the premise. You said every effect has its cause, and every effect has its cause, and every effect is dependent upon its cause. You didn't reject anything needing to be sustained. You're just ignoring the logical entailments of your own argument.
So this is good stuff for you to bring up in the conclusion, but right now he's asking the questions.
Okay, and we can. I haven't asked you a question in like the last 5 minutes. It's I've made a promise in my intro, and I want to see if I can fulfill that promise. Sapphire, what kind of revelation do you use to establish truth about reality?
There's multitudes of truth. Multitudes of methods I use to establish truth about reality.
Yep. What type of revelation do you use?
Use divine revelation, my personal sense perception, my experiences, and again, all of the arguments that I've posited, I use logic and reason, but all the arguments that I've posited up to this point are not being contended with.
Do you remember what I said in my intro about me using circular reasoning?
It's funny that you're running from the arguments that have been posited.
You are not making arguments.
Create an argument.
You're not making arguments. I'm asking you questions. How do you know that this revelation that you received, personal and divine, is trustworthy?
Now, are you cross-examining my arguments? Or
Stop asking me questions, Sapphire. Answer mine. How do you know that this revelation that was given to you is trustworthy?
This is the same thing, dude. Right? He asked a
much like
clarifying question. Which question are you asking me, Bubba? That's basically all he's asking, and Bubba can't even clarify what his question means. And he goes, "Stop!
And
just answer my question. Stop questioning my question."
Based on faith, just like mine.
This is insane,
And
dude.
No,
Bubba's
I
such an
think
idiot.
this needs to be called.
So,
this is like
what
a-
you've
So
just
what, we're on
Yeah,
the
but
same
Taco
level?
let it happen.
what you've conceded to
Yeah,
is
I
that
think next time
your
we needed someone else to moderate the
worldview
There
on
shouldn't be a
theism
next
provides
time
no
with Bubba.
explanatory scope that
Like,
deism
he's
doesn't.
done.
Me and you are
After
on
this
you're right
he's
on
pretty
the
much
same
done.
level, and this
He's
is where I'm
not
going to make my
serious.
final
It does,
statement.
actually.
This is where I'm going to make my final
Mhm.
statement and concede the rest of my time, because what Sapphire's just admitted by saying that his logic is circular, just like mine, he has faith in his trustworthy sense perception, is that we are in the same boat, as he just said.
In order to doubt that my
I'm making
mind
my
maps
final.
onto
I
reality.
conceded my time, Sapphire. This is where you stop talking,
Yeah.
and I just make my
Well,
final statement.
I'm answering the question you asked.
I'm not answering. I'm not asking you a question.
You did. You asked me.
No,
you
no.
asked me how.
Sapphire, this is Bubba's cross exam.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't asked you a
It
question.
is his prior question. It is the answer to his prior question. But
The last question that I asked you is, how do you know that this revelation is trustworthy?
Yeah,
After you answered, I conceded the rest of my time, and I'm making final statements now.
in
Because what
order
you've
to
just
doubt that my mind
stop
maps onto
answering.
reality, I have to assume that to be the case.
And what you've just admitted is that you have no more explanatory scope than I do. You both trust in your knowledge because it's trustworthy, and me and you are in the same boat. And if your faith in God gives you trustworthy sense perception, just like my own, it's on the same level as mine. And
That's not all I said.
there's nothing about your theory of theism that provides any more explanatory scope than mine. And there's nothing else to say at that point.
And you're conceding the rest of your time now, you said, right?
Yeah, I am just curious.
Gotcha.
How much time do I have left?
6.5 minutes.
Oh yeah, I'm done.
All right,
This is weird. Like,
All right, we'll go ahead and move into the audience Q&A. There's a
Hold on,
Q&A
I'm gonna
portion
step
on
into the
YouTube.
audience at this point.
In addition,
okay.
youtube.com/@realbreakfasttacos. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to everybody, though. We have 30 minutes. Know when you guys are ready, and I'll start the 30-minute timer.
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Cool. First question is for both of y'all. We'll start with Sapphire first because he's the affirmative. What would we expect to see, experience, or observe if it is necessary for God to be relational?
You would be expected to see, experience, what have you, the creation. Being that you are a part of the creation and God is the creator and the sustainer of all being, you would experience the things that there are to experience. And just like it says in the scriptures, the stars declare the handiwork of the Lord, that the creation is evidence of the creator. So the thing that you would experience would be the only things possible to experience, which would be the only things that exist. And the things that exist are contingent. The argument is inductive towards God, God being the necessary contingent being.
And then what would it look like if it was not necessary?
Exactly as we see reality now.
Oh, they're asking these to both of y'all. So, Sapphire, what would it look like if it was not necessary?
It wouldn't look like, because like I said, God is the sustainer of all being. The as I've argued earlier in my opening statement, as well as in my cross-examination with Bubba, if God ceased to sustain the creation, then the creation would cease to be. So it would be like nothing. It wouldn't be.
Okay, and then Bubba, what would we expect to see, experience, observe if it is necessary for God to be relational?
More divine revelations and things that you would confirm to be miracles, right? If we were to have a view, or like a world where God is relational, he interacts with his creation, then we would see God interacting with his creation more often. Like we would have more, I don't know a better way to put it than this, more Jesuses, right? Where God interacts with us, maybe speaks to us in ways that he makes himself more known, because I believe that the problem of divine hiddenness is a big issue in theism. If God is relational and he interacts with his creation, well, where is he? He hasn't shown himself to us, right? Sorry, I forgot to do something. And there was a second question, right?
What would it look like if God was not necessary? for that?
Yeah, it would be exactly as we perceive reality now. If God is not relational, then he doesn't interact with his creation. He doesn't make himself known, and all the theories that people make about their interactions with God are exactly that. They are theories. They're not like, when people say that they pray and God speaks to them, that's just like something that can't be proven, which is the case with most divine revelations and most uh, claims of God's interaction with others.
Gotcha. And we'll go ahead and move on to the questions in chat. We've got apophatic.
Oh. Hey, bud.
Who is your question for apophatic?
He's muted.
Oh.
Taco.
I fixed
Hello?
it.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Hi.
I'm unmuted. Hi. Okay, so is my mic working fine? Is it all
Yep.
good? Yeah, so in the you didn't seem to give any, and this is for Bubba here. You didn't seem to give any rebuttals to Sapphire's earlier argument. I don't even know if you have any or if you understood what he was saying. So I would like to bring up the argument again. Earlier in his argument, he said that under Deism, it leads to the conclusion that God is the cause of the becoming of existence and being, and not the direct cause of the being himself, hence the indirect and direct cause. So what would you have to say to that objection?
Can you say it again? I'm confused.
Yeah, so earlier in Sapphire's argument here, he said that God is the direct cause of the universe, meaning that he is not just the source of the becoming of the universe, but the source of all being and of itself. But deism leads to where God is only the source of the becoming of the universe and not the source of all being, because if God were the source of all being, then he would have to necessarily sustain and continuously act upon his existence.
Yeah, no, I just reject the premise that God is the required source of all being. It's that I just say that God is the cause of all being. Is not sustaining anything really. It's not necessary because it's just not necessary for him to. It's not necessary for God to, because you and Sapphire believe that God is like the light bulb and the light, and I'm saying that God is like the builder in the building.
Yeah, but the builder in the building assumes that creation is not ex nihilo, that God created out of already made materials that existed. And I think that's kind of the dispute that he's pointing out here, which is that all of existence or being simultaneously depends on God's existence as a necessary grounding for contingent things. Hence the contingency argument, which I don't think you answered any of his objections there. But the point is that in your system, you are denying that God actively sustains the universe and preserves it. But as I said, the second ways of preserving something is through indirect causation or essential preservation, which you didn't answer. So the indirect causation or the direct causation assumes preservation.
If you wanted a more direct answer, I would say that God creating the world, if he did create the world ex nihilo, I answered you in the side chat. I'm agnostic on whether or not he really did create the universe ex nihilo, but it's a non sequitur to say that God created the universe ex nihilo and God is necessary for sustaining all the universe. It's like I don't see how
Okay.
you're getting from A to
Am I
B.
willing to, am I able to ask one more question, Taco, or do I have to go now?
Sure. I guess you can do one more if it's a quick one.
Yeah, just one more quick one. So his argument was that there was two ways of preserving something. The first way was to remove the corruption that would, cause something to die out or whatever, and the second way is to be the cause of its being, right? So if God is the cause of its being and not just its becoming, then it would mean necessarily that he is preserving it, given the two ways of preserving something directly and indirectly.
Was there a question in that?
I'm asking, what do you have to object to that argument that God necessarily preserves the universe, as there is the second way of preservation, which is actively causing something's being?
Is that it's not necessary for God to create the universe ex nihilo. He could have, but that doesn't mean he did. It's not necessary for God to God could have created the universe out of. I don't know the method of creation. I've made that very clear for the third time now, and I know you trained Sapphire, right? So you trained him to ask this question, and I just say I don't know in a very honest way, and you guys keep on trying to pigeonhole me, which you guys have accused, well, which Sapphire's accused me of doing to Abismo, and it's just not like it's just not what I believe. Sorry.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you, Taco, for bringing me up here. I really know your competence now, Bubba.
Thank you.
I didn't pigeonhole you.
Appreciate you coming up.
Wow, love you, apophatic.
Then we got. I'm a hunter. What's going on?
Is he here?
I'm a hunter. You got a mic up, bro.
All right, I'll move you back to the audience because we're working with
I'm
limited
mute,
time
dude.
here.
I got on
if
it.
Yeah, if you get it fixed, we'll pull you back up. And we've got Luke.
Hello. So I have a question for both of more specifically one for each. I'll just start with Sapphire. So
Okay.
Sapphire, my question for you is you said by God's nature he didn't exist as a trinity, but as a theist and orthodox that you must believe that by his nature he has to exist as a triune God.
No, I was saying that that is revealed knowledge, and I was saying that it's not necessary. It's not logically necessary for him to be a trinity. It's revelationally necessary. So I do believe that God is a trinity. The reason why I was not trying to take the debate down that road is because the debate was structured in such a way that we were arguing about, is God relational?
Mm.
The problem that I have with taking it into the direction of, critiquing other aspects of my Christian faith is that they don't actually have any relevance to the topic of the debate about God being relational. So God being a Trinity is the case, but that is revelatory knowledge. It's not logically. It's not a logical necessity.
Well, I would say God's existence, right? It's just a further up question on that. Would you agree? But wouldn't you agree that by God's nature, if he exists as a Trinity, that would be relational in the self, in the way that the Son's relationship is to the Father, or the
Yeah,
Father's relation to the Spirit, right?
as defined in terms of relationships, yes, and even you could even say in terms of the philosophical, it would be about the connecting of the distinct personhoods. However, that's more of a question about the makeup of the personhood of the God, rather than it being about it necessary for God to be relational. Which is why I said that the relation example is creator and creation. That is a relation. And that's why it's necessary. It's not just a linguistic necessity, but it's a logical necessity. And it's one that Bubba doesn't seem to understand when he denies that it's necessary for God to be relational.
Mm.
Because if Bubba's God is a creator of anything, he is inherently relational to that thing.
Mm.
That thing exists relationally to the thing that created it.
Yes.
Which is why I'm saying it's an incoherent system over there from that side.
Mm. Yeah. Thank you. So my question is for Bubba, if you don't mind me asking Taco.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so my question is for Bubba, is about divine hiddenness. But don't you agree that God's decision to remain hidden is for you to seek him and not for him to force you, to which would be theism and not deism, because he would act into his creation, because he's being active to reveal himself, if you seek him.
I can. Is this like more of a personal question for me to seek God, or is it more of like a whether or not a logical question of is it necessary for God to reveal himself?
I would say logical.
Okay. I would say that the first dude asked the question of what would the world look like if God was relational? I responded by saying, if God was relational, then he would reveal himself much more often than not. people would know of God's existence because he reveals himself. He's a relational personal being which interacts with us. And people try to say that things are miracles or things have been divinely revealed to them off of things that I believe are just a case of conditioned belief. Like people that go to church are more inclined to believe that God revealed himself because they're told that God answers their prayers in mysterious ways and whatnot. So, to answer your question more directly, does divine and your question was, remind me again so I can answer it.
Divine hiddenness.
Yeah, and I would say people should, and I implore people to seek out God if you're anywhere from a hardcore non-believer or a hardcore believer, and see how many times he does reveal himself, and ask the question: can this be written off as just a case of naturalism and not supernatural divine revelation?
Yeah. So one more question related to that topic, real quickly, is to the point where if God hasn't revealed himself, but I think there are many ways that he does, such as in the Eucharist or, some of the Marian apparitions that we do have, like documented. I would say there were many times in history where God has revealed himself that is historically fact and documented.
Like with Jesus?
No, I would say more specifically God's appearance using, Mary or the Eucharist, for example. I'm saying, like, how would you respond to that if God reveals himself through those actions and not in the same way that you're expecting him to?
Right. Just because the ways that people have always described in the last 1,000 years, let's say, a interaction with God, I believe can all be written off as has a naturalistic explanation. So things like the what's it called? The Shroud of Turin? No, not the Shroud. That's not supernatural. The the
Marian apparitions.
Marian apparitions are actually have a very naturalistic explanation. And
All right.
I'm not saying these people are lying. I'm just saying that these people have a false belief.
All right.
Thank you for the questions, Luke. We appreciate you coming up.
Thank you.
And then we've got teach kids to be trans.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, what's going on?
Cool. I want to say it was a great debate. I had a lot of fun, and I promise this is not a mean question. I'm going to be serious, okay? So, Bubba, I love you, but if I wasn't a good friend, I wouldn't ask you tough questions. So this is going to be a tough one, all right? Brace yourself.
Ooh, I'm braced.
All right. So earlier about the thing about relational. So I want to touch on something Sapphire said earlier. If I push a ball, and that ball is now moving, right? It may not be the case that I'm continually pushing the ball, but is it not the case that I have a relational thing with that ball? Because the ball only moved because of me. That is relational, is it not?
That is a cause and effect relationship, not a personal relationship. You don't have, because the way that I told Sapphire that I define a personal relationship, or would be to have a meaningful connection.
Okay, yeah, because I guess it's my fault. I wasn't here for the whole debate, but yeah, the debate title is it necessary for God to be relational? And I guess it's just different meanings for relational. Yeah, I do feel like it was an impasse, like it's just you talking past each other a lot. But I did learn a lot by listening, and I respect this. This was good. I love you guys. Kiss, kiss.
Kiss, kiss. Mwah.
Just real quick, I love to see all of the heavy hitters from all of our groups coming in and supporting just by watching. That's good.
All right, now Abismo does want to come up. I know Bubba has preemptively said he doesn't want to take any questions from him, but if he has a question for Sapphire, we can take it. Okay, I guess it's for Bubba.
Phrase it as a question for me.
Bro is gonna try and he's gonna flame me later. He's
I'll just
like,
Bubba's
a pussy.
Oh, he auto-declined, he said.
He auto-declined it?
Alright,
hey,
if you
Bubba.
got a question for Sapphire, it's okay, but Bubba doesn't want to respond to any questions from you, and I have to respond.
Oh, is that what it is?
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
So you're just going to be selective about what questions you take in an open debate?
All right, Anda, you're welcome to come up if you like. You're still invited up. I'll invite. I'm a hunter. What's going on?
Unmute, dude. Gotta unmute.
I hope he's still here. I think he's trying to speak to us, but he can't.
When you auto join the thing, it mutes you, bro. You gotta unmute.
Yeah,
I get worried when they take a while. All right, we'll move you back to the audience, and we can try again here in a minute. Then we've got Wise.
Yeah, he's back.
Question.
Hello. I just this is a question for Bubba. I'm just wondering if he needs a pastor yet, and I'd be willing to pastor him if he does.
I would love for you to pastor me, Wise Ape.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Wise Ape. Then Bismo said he does have a question for Sapphire.
Hey, what up, Sapphire? So yeah, Sapphire. So based on both your opening statement, and I guess your cross-examination of Bubba, it was pretty clear to me that you did see. I mean, the framing isn't necessary for God to be relational. Trans did a great job trying to elucidate that distinction. I really didn't get a sense that Bubba was able to understand that even a logical relation is a necessary relation, whereas normative relations is something else, and right, and that's going to be like personal stuff, like in terms of values, rules, and expectations, and not claims. It seems again that Bubba doesn't seems to have trouble distinguishing between descriptive type of claims and also normative claims, right? So there was a point though that I felt like you were asking clarification from Bubba on that particular issue about necessary conditions or necessary attributes or principles of a first principle. Okay, so I believe in his opening statement, Bubba claimed that it was necessary for a first principle. No, I'm sorry. In his opening statement, as a deist, right, he defined God as a first principle, as in like uncaused cause. But that it was not necessary to have divine attributes or properties, or that they could even be logically or rationally proven to be the case. And then you asked him about how creation itself is sustained, and you said that there were necessary conditions within creation itself, which, as a self-sustaining principle, have to be sustained by a rational principle. Could you clarify again how you find Bubba's view or hand-waving away of rational proofs for logical necessity to be incoherent with deism as it relates to divine attributes properties?
Yeah, no problem. So again, like for example, when I asked Bubba if he believed that, and I asked him this, apophatic asked him this when he came up, but I asked him if he believes that God is the source of all being. The problem that we keep running into is that Bubba seems to think that the watchmaker analogy is sufficient to explain how God is the creator of the thing and then ceases to be the sustainer of the thing. The problem is that much like he has throughout the entirety of the debate, you can really pick out any of the major points that I made. He has committed the definite fallacy, and rather than acknowledging the terms and the phrases that I've actually employed in the way that I've employed them, he changes them over to mean something different that's more conducive to the direction he was trying to take the argument. So, like, when I said God is personal, the personal element that I'm describing there would be the rational argument that God has a will and an intellect, which is something that Bubba holds to. But what he intended was for me to say that, like, we're besties and we have, shared values and we interact on an interpersonal basis. The problem is, like I said, for the relationality argument, that is God relation, is it necessary for God to be relational? It is logically necessary if God is the creator, which Bubba holds to, that the creator, by virtue of being the creator, exists in relation to the thing which is created. The reason why we kept having the impasse is not because it's not a logical necessity that that be the case. It's because Bubba keeps continually committing the definite fallacy and trying to switch the definition from existing in relation to having a relationship with. It's not because of any failure to expound upon the philosophy or the logic that's involved with it. It's rather Bubba's unwillingness to actually confront the question as it was posed.
I think you clarified that very well. Thank you very much, Sapphire, for your work.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Bismo. All right, we've got 7 minutes left on this almost. Silent Night.
So my question is for my Bubba.
My Bubba.
You claim that the deist position. I'm gonna make this clear. You claim the deist position that God created the world but doesn't participate in the world because he has no need to. He's made it systematically so perfect he doesn't need to interject. So how do you explain all the supernatural occurrences that happen? For example, like hauntings of like spottings of like ghosts and documented possessions of people, crawling on the wall and speaking different languages. Again, documented, recorded and all that stuff. Do you claim that throughout time and history it's always been like faked?
I believe that whatever those people saw is simply just a false belief. Simple as that. Like, it's great if those people had experiences. I mean, in the realm of believing in the supernatural, that those people can believe in the supernatural because of the experiences that they saw. Like, if people really did see people crawling on the walls, that's good for them. But I mean, hasn't happened to a person like me. And also, I don't think that the existence of ghosts or people crawling on the walls immediately just means that, therefore God.
Well, if lesser supernatural creatures can exist and participate in the world, why not the creator?
I do believe that the creator exists. You okay?
No. Participate in the world, bro.
um Again, it's just because I believe that all the experiences that people claim to have seen about ghosts, about uh possessed people crawling on walls, is just a false belief. Like, I think that maybe they believe that they saw whatever they saw, but I don't think that they actually saw it. Like, or if there really was like a girl crawling on the walls, for example, then it's not because she's supernatural. Maybe she's just got strong forearms, bro. Like,
Um, the this is a very bizarre response, but okay.
okay, bye.
Thank you. And then B.S. Lewis was asking both of you to provide your definition of relational.
Oh yeah, Sapphire agreed with my definition of relational. It was, well, no, he didn't. I lied. I can provide both of our definitions of relational. I say that a being that is relational is a being which you can have a relationship with. Sapphire says that it's a being with personhood, consciousness, and the will and intention and rational nature.
No, that's not how I define relate.
Let Sapphire clarify.
If the question's for me, let me answer.
We were having a hard time hearing you now, though.
How's that? Is that better?
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh my God, it's so loud.
What I described as relational was the philosophical definition of relation. It is how two distinct entities are connected. That is my definition of relation. Bubba was lying, like you said. He immediately corrected and said that he was lying. But that's why I wasn't allowing them to answer on my behalf. No. The definition of relation, as I've employed it the entirety of this debate, is how two distinct entities are connected. Ergo, creator, creation.
Gotcha. And then we've got Duck McStooge.
Exactly what Sapphire said, word for word.
What's going on, everyone? Hey, I've loved watching you guys so far. I'm one of the mods on YouTube, so I'm very proud of my role with the taco community. But yeah, I got a question for both you guys. So as someone who's more secular atheist, one of the things that I don't normally like asking is how explanatory is your position on God? How explanatory it is, and is that important? You know, and so yeah, not to like espouse or whatever it is, but like you know, it's important to me because science sort of leans into how explanatory things can be a lot of times. So I'm just curious if we're arguing about deism and theism, and that's like a great debate to have. Like, you know, do you think your definition is more explanatory than the other person's, or is that important for us to know? Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll
thanks.
go first.
Okay.
Yeah, since just so he understands first, I'm an ex-Christian. The reason I'm an ex-Christian is because I believe that Christianity and theism doesn't provide the explanatory power that deism does. Because I've been on a search for a belief system, like, or a religion, I should say, for the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
And yes, so under that, I believe that deism, the reason that it provides more explanatory proof than theism and a personal God, is because I, of course, believe that relationality with his creation is not necessary. The worldview that holds the most truth is the one that holds the least amount of presuppositions. The only presupposition that deism holds is that here's God, here's his nature, and he created the universe. And that gets rid of all the unnecessary shit that theism and Christianity claims. He doesn't have to be a trinity. He doesn't have to be Jesus. He doesn't have to be all powerful, all knowing. That gets rid of a lot of the issues with Christianity, such as the belief in supernaturalism, such as the belief in the power of the problem of evil, such as divine hiddenness. You would expect God or for the world to contain suffering and evil if God doesn't interact with his creation, and that he's not all good or all powerful, and that he doesn't interact with his creation. It's unexpected under a theist worldview, especially one that Sapphire holds, which is that God is all good and all powerful.
So I would take away from that. I would understand that God can explain why we have a complex universe, but we don't need God to explain like
Did under a theist worldview, especially one that Sapphire holds, which is that God is all good and all powerful.
So I would take away from that. I would understand that God can explain why we have a complex universe, but we don't need God to explain like why when I was 22 years old I drove through Starbucks every morning because I was depressed to go work at a call center. Like that's not the type of problem or thing that like God gets
We're
involved.
out
Like
of
that
time
sort
on
of
this.
thing.
If you wanted to finish
Yeah,
up
we
one
can.
last
Yeah, we
question
can
with
finish.
Sapphire.
Can I
Like we can finish. We can take his
Okay,
questions
okay,
out to
okay,
full
that's
because
okay.
I have time. Yeah. No, where'd he go?
I don't.
You can come back.
I don't have time. I've got to. I've got time for the closing. I can answer his part of the question because it seemed like it was the same question for both of us. If that's right.
Yeah. I really wanted to hear what both of you guys thought as well. So cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But then I do have to do closings whenever we get to that time because I had to put my kid down at the end of the debate. So. But as far as just the answer to your question about explanatory power, first and foremost, I'd say that we shouldn't allow people like Bubba to make flat statements like the things that have the most explanatory power, the things with the least presuppositions. I'd argue that Occam's razor is an assumption in and of itself that the thing that has the most explanatory power is the thing that is able to correctly describe what is true. It doesn't matter
really
how
good point.
complex that answer is because quantum physics is arguably a very complex field. The average person, I'll tell you right now, just me straight up, I don't even begin to approach the necessary understanding to dabble in that field. All right. But the power to explain what is true is what is important rather than how complex or simple that it is.
So you're saying, so if I can summarize, so that basically means that it's possible for like a nonlinear description to exist. Like I can, there's maybe more than one narrative about the way that the universe came to be. But like at the end of the day, God explains that sort of.
Yeah, and also I will go ahead and just say quickly that is not Occam's razor.
I'm in the middle of yes, it is. I'm in the middle of my.
Sorry, Bob.
But other part of that is that I would have a problem with there being unanswered questions as like a disqualifier for like a system of truth, because every system, every philosophy, even scientific fields, all of them have questions that are unanswered. All of them deal with unknowns. They hit a wall at some point where the knowledge just isn't sufficient. We don't have an explanation for X, Y, and Z. So, where Christianity might fail someone's like personal list of qualifying questions, it doesn't mean that Christianity is therefore false. It just means that their personal desires haven't been fulfilled by Christianity. And that the very same thing can be said for any worldview, any paradigm, any means of understanding the world. You're always going to have unknowns.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the answers.
Thank you for coming up, Duck. All right, we'll go ahead and move into the conclusions. Hopefully you guys got some ammo for your conclusions. You'll have 5 minutes each. We're going to start with the affirmative and close with the negative. Second closing is going to be the negative. Sapphire, whenever you're ready, let me know, and I'll start your 5-minute timer.
Yeah, I'm ready.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, so in closing, I'd just like to say that Bubba never really engaged with any of the previous arguments that I gave in my opening statement or answered any of my objections. Now, I'm not sure whether it was just a matter of personal misunderstanding or not, but Bubba in his cross-examination, instead of trying to make arguments against my actual points of contention, he engaged with stuff that didn't have any correlation to the debate and to the topic. Bubba has an unwillingness, and you can see this if you go through his cross-exam with me, to answer or to respond to any of my arguments. He asked a bunch of questions that were completely irrelevant. He asked about the Trinity. He asked me about relationality, but he never engaged with my argument that I presented in my opening statement whatsoever, which I honestly expected him to do. Ultimately, Bubba's contentions about, if God existed, we would see more evidence of him existing, interacting with the world. We'd have more Jesuses or more divine manifestations. That's really just him being personally upset that God is not a monkey on a street corner dancing for coins, that God is not a gumball machine that reliably and consistently responds to the quarters that you put into it and turn the crank. God does not interact with Bubba in the means and through the means and in the manner that he personally desires. So he finds it easier to reject God. The other problem that I have with some of his other sentiments that were brought up in some of the question and answer segments are, he would explain people believing in God, people going to church, believing in God, being personal and interacting is because, and even though they might not see it, is because God works in mysterious ways. I would argue that the opposite could be the case, that people who believe in God are more likely to go to church, not that people who go to church are more likely to believe in God. The church teaches a sacramental or interactive theology. It teaches that God does, in fact, engage with his creation. And people who don't believe that are not likely to attend services. They're not likely to commune with those groups. And I would expect that to be normal. It doesn't. I don't think that Bubba's worldview has explanatory power. I don't think that it engages with the logical entailments of his position. I think that it's cobbled together, a Frankenstein philosophy that he is himself currently figuring out. And for him to say, I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't know this, I don't know that, and then tout that he has more explanatory power than any other worldview is silly on its face. But that's it.
Thank you for the conclusion. And then, Bubba, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Yep, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right.
The reason that I say I don't know for the record is because it's a more honest thing to do. but that's besides the point that I was going to make. It's more dishonest for Sapphire to say that he does know as to the reason as to the state of the affairs are the way that it is. In order for a theory like the one that me and Sapphire are providing, God created the universe and he's relational, and God created the universe and he's not relational. In order to find out which theory provides the most utility, as I said earlier, would depend on the amount of information that it provides about the universe and the variety of explanatory scope about reality. Sapphire conceded that he believes, just like I do, that you have access to logic, knowledge, and reasoning because he has faith in his rationale and his empiricism. So that would mean that Sapphire has taken Deism, the belief that God created the universe and nothing else, and tacked on all these other qualities such as being powerful, all-knowing, triune. That's my favorite part. He admitted that God being triune is not necessary for creation. Dude. None of these things are necessary for the universe to exist in the way that it exists.
Bad.
Sapphire played a heavy emphasis on the reason that God is relational is because it's necessary for him to sustain his creation.
You should have stuck around and watched the debate with us.
As much as Abysmo and
dude, I had to do my evening prayers.
Apophatic and I think that was it. Tried to pigeonhole me and say that I believe that the universe is like the light bulb and the light, the light bulb and the light.
Yeah, it wasn't
analogy.
worth
I
skipping
don't,
evening
for the 100th fucking time. The universe is more analogous to the builder and the building. Sapphire has been trying to pigeonhole me into not believing in that for this entire debate.
Bubba's
and
defense is stop pigeonholing me. No, not in my booty hole.
And it doesn't need a sustainer.
So bad,
it's
dude.
Unknown whether or not
he's
the
so disingenuous.
Is going
he's just
to
bad
eternally
faith.
or
all around.
Exist
he's
for a finite amount of time.
Yeah.
We have scientific theories, but we don't know for certain.
You wanna like view people in the best light possible.
I don't know whether or not
you just can't do that
going to
with
sustain itself forever or not.
You just can't do that
because Sapphire has added all of these unnecessary qualities onto God. He has created this worldview. He accuses me of having some fucking Frankenstein worldview, but he is the one who has unnecessary qualities onto God and has created this worldview which adds more problems than it answers, such as the issue of divine hiddenness. If he is relational, where the fuck is he? You can't point to God. You know you can't. You can't point back in time to Jesus. That is what is entailed, and like such as the problem of evil as well. If God is the way you describe him, which you admitted, all powerful and all good and triune, then this is what is entailed by God being relational. It is not necessary for God to be relational. And what we didn't get, to, unfortunately, was the fact that Sapphire outright lied when that dude came up and asked a question. When he said Sapphire lied by saying that I lied when I presented his own definition of relationality against him, and he didn't like it because I wrote down exactly what he said. I have all my notes, and we're going to go back in the video and find out whether or not I was lying. He said that relationality requires personhood, conscious mind, and the all power. Oh, excuse me, wrong definition. Now I look stupid. Relationality is I guess we'll just... Oh yeah, personhood, consciousness, and a mind, all-powerful, and the ability to create. But still, it's like, but I guess that's the end of my time, and I'll just concede my conclusion. Like I said, that's all I got.
Gotcha. Thank you, both of you, for your time tonight. This was a fun debate. I hope everybody in the audience loved the debate.
Oh, what do you...
Oh, sorry.
This AI background... that Taco is like put for the last two debates is just so terrible.
No, I didn't.
Man.
Well, I was gonna say, where's the after party? Where's the VC after party?
Yeah,
it's funny.
I was gonna say,
but it's distracting.
I'm gonna go spend
some
time
with
with my
fish
wife.
in the oven.
Do you guys have a room you want to go into?
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have fish and chips.
I'll make a JTC.
I'll hop in there after I put my kids to bed.
So there's going to be a Join to Create channel on Politics Discord. I'd appreciate it if one of the mods on the YouTube could link the Discord, so anybody that wants to pop in there from YouTube hops in the Join to Create as well. It'll be at the bottom of the stage.